What's going on, friends? I've got here a 2012 Nissan Altima, and I'm going to use this car to point out to you the location of the 2 cooling fans, the 3 cooling fan fuses, and also the 3 cooling fan relays. I'll give you some troubleshooting steps for when your engine is overheating or your AC is not blowing cold. So to begin, let's take a look at the cooling fans. They're pretty much obstructed by this shroud, this air duct, which you can remove by removing the 2 10mm bolts here and here on the top of the radiator. With those bolts out, you can pull upward on this and then outward, and it will come out like so. Set that aside. Now, peering over, here we have the 2 cooling fans. The cooling fan on the passenger side is cooling fan number 2, and the cooling fan on the driver's side is cooling fan number 1. Now, my favorite thing to do as far as troubleshooting the cooling fans is to see if they can turn by hand. That's a really fast way to see if what you're dealing with is a mechanical issue with the fan itself, because obviously if the fan does not spin freely, then there's a problem with it. You can also check to see if it's rubbing on the radiator, like if you've had some sort of collision damage. After spinning the fans, another thing that you can do is you can actually tap on the back of the fan motor. Sometimes there will be a bad connection in this fan, and if you tap on it and get the fan to work again, then that's an indication of that bad connection. You can also wiggle the wires that go into the fan motor. There can be corrosion present on the pins. Now let's take a look at the connectors for the cooling fans. The cooling fan number 2 connector is here. Cooling fan number 1 connector is here. To remove these connectors, you have to apply a lot of pressure on this retaining piece of the connector, and then the connector will pop out as you are pushing on that pin. Pretty simple. Now, before we talk about the wires that go to the cooling fan, let's take a look at the fuses. They're all going to be located underneath this fuse box cover, which you remove by prying up on the front, and in the back you push in. You can read about the fuses here, but I'll go ahead and point out to you the important ones. There are 2 40 amp fuses here. These are what provide power for turning the fans. So the one closest to me is cooling fan number 1, and there's cooling fan number 2. Now, for the fans to actually work, they need more than just power. They need a ground, and the ground comes from 3 different relays. And those relays are powered by this 10 amp fuse right here. So we'll pull that out. You can check that out and see what a good fuse looks like. So as I've said, these cooling fans, they receive constant power from these fuses, and the speed that they operate at is actually due to 3 different relays that activate. There's radiator relay number 1, and number 2 is actually located in a difficult to see spot. You can take a look at it by squeezing these 2 tabs together and lifting up on this connector junction block. And I'll pull that aside, and there we can see relay number 2, the brown relay right there. There's a 3rd relay. Unfortunately, it's not accessible because it is built into this cluster. This cluster is called the Intelligent Power Distribution Module, but it is anything but intelligent. Anyways, let's go back to the connectors. We can try to make sense of what is going on. So looking at the driver's side cooling fan number 1, we can see that there are 2 red and yellow wires here. These provide constant power to these pins. And again, when you check these pins out, make sure that there's no corrosion. Sometimes they will corrode or burn, and that is why your cooling fans don't work. The radiator cooling fan number 2 will provide a ground on the red wire. So you should see a ground on this pin when the cooling fan number 2 relay is activated. That will provide the highest speed possible for this fan, is when you get the ground there. Now there's a blue wire, and that blue wire is interesting because sometimes you receive a ground on that wire. Other times, depending on what the relays are doing, that ground will be through the other cooling fan. And when that occurs, both of the fans will be spinning, but at a lower speed. So when cooling fan relay number 1 activates, it provides a ground on the blue wire from the red-white wire here. So this red-white wire actually gets connected to this blue wire when the cooling fan number 1 relay is activated. Or sorry, when the cooling fan number 1 is activated. Now let's look at this one. This cooling fan receives ground constantly from the 2 black wires, and on this one it's actually the power that's switched. So on the blue wire on this connector, that will receive power from either cooling fan relay. Actually, it receives power only when cooling fan number 2 relay is activated. So if you see power coming in on this pin, that's telling you that the cooling fan number 2 is working. The red-white wire that we've talked about previously, if cooling fan number 1 relay is activated, you will get a ground. If the cooling fan 3 relay is activated, you will get a, if cooling fan 1 relay is activated, you get power. If cooling fan 3 relay is activated, you get power, but through this fan. So it's a less amount of power. But yeah, I hope that this was helpful for you. Please do let me know down below if you have any questions or any advice about the cooling fans on your Altima. And thank you for watching.